Hey, welcome home. I'm Irina, and in today's video, I'm interviewing Fiel Sahir. He is the man behind BetweenThreeWorlds.com, one of the biggest parted people I know, and also the creator of the Loving Out Loud philosophy. So the reason I made this little blurb just before the video is, first of all, to say happy birthday to Fiel. And also to say that this video was actually recorded a really long time ago. It was about a year and a half ago when after Fiel and I met, and the discussion was just too good not to share, even though so much time has gone by. So we really dug deep into the similarities between learning a language and learning music. And this was such a fun topic for me because I'm like a music phobe. So every time I've tried to learn music, it hasn't worked out for me, which is why I loved Fiel's approach of comparing them, because I know there are a lot of people out there who are, talented or hobby musicians. But if you're a little bit scared of languages, maybe this can also kind of open you up in the same way that it opened me up to the idea of seeing music in a different way. So enjoy, and I'm going to put a link below to if you want to check out Fiel's talk from the Berlin Polyglot Gathering. All right, see you. Enjoy. So hi, this is Irina from LanguageCatalyst.com, and I'm here with Fiel Sahir. Hi, Fiel.
Hey,
Welcome.
thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. So I'm really, really excited to talk to you today about what language learners and musicians can learn from each other. And you are a classical guitarist, yes?
hmm
Okay. So I'll just fill everyone in a little bit about you. So you're an avid language learner. You were born in Portland, Oregon, but you grew up in New York, and your family's Indonesian, so you're like Indonesian American, right? Or did you say like Indo-Amer? How did you say it? You said it
I think
differently.
I said Indonesian American. Yeah.
Okay, okay, Indonesian American. And now you're living in Düsseldorf, right?
hmm
Studying classical guitar at where did it go? Robert Schumann Hochschule?
Yeah.
Okay, really cool. We met in Berlin just this past year, and you gave a talk about what musicians and language learners, or what language learners could learn from musicians and vice versa. And you told us that you don't change music, it changes you. So can you tell us a bit about what this means and how it applies to language learning?
Yeah. So when we approach music, if we if we come thinking we know the answers, then whatever music has to teach us won't go through our heads. And
Mm-hmm.
so uh, that's a huge thing. So the biggest change of heart I see is sometimes is people go into it and, like I said, they feel that they know the answers.
Mm-hmm.
But the most important thing to remember is that we need to start from zero. Now, obviously, you don't always start automatically from zero. Sometimes you know a few things. But the
Mm-hmm.
most important thing is to be humble and vulnerable. And so when somebody has something to say, you listen, even though you may not agree.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what we as musicians are doing. We have lessons with different teachers from all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't agree with all of them. We're not supposed to, but we're supposed to listen. And then the other thing is that you hear something once, in a few years' time, you might actually like what the person said and say, oh, my idea was actually really stupid. Just like when we're teenagers, we think our parents are dumb
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, and then we grow. And so you were mentioning about how sometimes people feel they don't like the losing of control when they're in another country, right? And so
Yeah.
they stick with the expat bubble. And so it's interesting because we're afraid of a loss of control when we speak another language,
Mm-hmm.
but it's actually a paradox. So what we're doing is we're putting ourselves in a box,
Mm-hmm.
and so we only have our hearts or control in this little box. But the truth is, if we give up a little bit of control, we will
Mm-hmm.
have a greater amount of heart and control by having two languages. For instance, if for those learning Finnish or whatever the case may be, you
Mm-hmm.
won't only have the realm of English, but you'll have the realm of other languages. And so maybe people are afraid of messing up, but that's a part of it. Change of heart. So when you mess up, you actually learn.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I really like that. I really like that idea. Yeah, so do you have any advice for people that are kind of struggling to find this balance between like when you are humble and you start from zero, sometimes you end up in this like glass half empty mindset
Hmm.
where you're just like, wow, all the things I don't know, and
Right.
kind of taking that first step forward can be so overwhelming that you maybe ask yourself like, why am I even doing this? Like, can I even do this? And how do you have any advice for dealing with that kind of dilemma?
Yeah, I was just remembering something I heard Chris Broholm on one of the actual Fluency podcasts. I think his guest was Idosa Ness on that one, and he was, I forget who it was, but somebody was saying that um, for people that just want to set goals but are just afraid, and you can't jump from zero to everything. And
Mm-hmm.
so he was saying about this person was saying how there was one person that said, "Okay, I'm gonna go to the gym and I want to work out, and that's my goal for this year." But he said he made it really, really small baby steps.
Yeah.
And so what he did was the first day what he did was he signed up for the gym. Okay. The next day he went to the gym, signed in, and then left.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next day after that, he actually went and did like, I don't know, 5 minutes or something like that. And so
Yeah.
it's, I think baby steps are really important.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing is about, yeah, about knowing things. And so it's interesting because, I mean, this is an a provable fact, but the tendency is that people that tend to know more,
Mm-hmm.
they are less afraid, and actually they know that they know how much they don't know. The more you know, the more you realize you don't.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think fear is something that we have to eliminate in order to get to humility. It's a huge subject. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know if it's about like eliminating fear. I don't know if it ever
Mhm.
fully goes away. It's just kind of like
Yeah.
embracing it. Like, oh,
Yeah.
hello.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Embracing it.
Yeah.
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 But I like that. I was thinking like that's a tweetable, the you can't go from zero to everything. I think that that's good to keep in mind because we're so like, okay, I don't want to be in this situation anymore. I just want to speak this language. And then it's like, right, it doesn't happen like that. So like baby steps in
Yeah.
between.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, in your talk in Berlin, you likened the areas of training in music to areas of training in language learning. So, I think that some people who play instruments would be like really pleasantly surprised by some of the overlaps. So, could you briefly tell us a little bit about what overlaps you saw there?
Yeah. So I came up with four very basic equivalents from music to language learning. And so I'll list them off. For music, it's practice, technique, music theory, and ear training, which
Hmm.
can be equated to somewhat study, accent reduction, grammar, and vocabulary. Now, the thing is, they're very interchangeable.
Study,
And
accent
so,
reduction,
yeah. So
grammar, vocab.
practice is a huge word, and so is study. So practice and study kind of encompass all the other things together.
Hmm.
And so you also mentioned, sometimes maybe people aren't a big fan of the word study
Hmm.
and the word
I'm
practice.
allergic to it.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. The thing is, I actually didn't do very well in studying languages in general. I just kind of picked things up. Now, I the thing is with music, you can't really, you have to, and so it's something to accept, but also something to, I guess, ignore
Hmm.
the fact that, oh, it's studying a book, and like,
Hmm.
because grammar for me is still difficult, which I'll get into. And so
Yeah, or
practice
like if
for
you sit
us,
down and you're like, I'm practicing as opposed
right?
to I'm playing.
Yeah, no, people, you can find interviews online of famous musicians that say, I actually hate practicing, so I practice 3 hours a day, and that's it. And for us as students, that's nothing. You got
Hmm.
to do at least five. Um,
Hmm.
but they figured out
It's
a way, or
intense.
they're at a certain level, and so actually, when you're beginning, more practice, and it gets less and less and less as you get older.
Hmm.
So kind of the same with study. We just accept it, but we make it fun for ourselves. We don't bore ourselves.
Hmm.
Uh, and so technique. Uh, so musicians, our hands, when we're born as babies, our hands aren't automatically formed to play the violin or guitar. It takes a lot of muscle formation. Yeah, can you imagine? If life was that easy,
Yeah,
but our
just like
hands,
born like this.
right? So the whole thing with technique, and same thing with accent reduction. We our muscles are formed. So if we're native English speakers, our mouths are formed to make English sounds.
Hmm.
They're not formed to make French sounds. But
Hmm.
over time, we can practice and get a really good French accent. So the same thing with technique. So musicians are always practicing technique because we know our hands are not made for instruments. So in a weird way, it's kind of not natural what we're doing, but
Hmm.
it takes training. And so sometimes we just feel, and I did this actually, was I just felt that if I just kept on listening to French things and stuff, I would automatically be able to pick up the accent. But the truth is, you have to train it. And
Yeah.
so, for those of you that are wondering, Gabriel Weiner has really good stuff. His pronunciation trainers, and Idal Sanes has the Mimic Method,
Hmm.
and there's tons of other things online. And
Okay.
so,
We should put some links below this video so people can
yeah,
check that out.
yeah,
Yeah.
I can send you those. Actually, they're in the presentation slides I sent you as well.
Oh,
So
okay.
at the end, yeah, that are all at the bottom.
Yeah.
Uh, music theory. So music theory and grammar are both things that put a lot of people to sleep, including myself. And I'm not a big fan.
Hmm.
But if you understand music theory, you understand what's going on in music. If you understand grammar, you understand what's happening in a language. And so
So
as
is music theory like learning to read music, for example? And like I'm like 0%
no, it's fine.
musical.
Yeah, yeah. So it includes being able to read the music, but also to see what's going on. What is the composer doing here? Why did
Hmm.
he put this note instead of that note? Why did he change the name? And just all the other little things. So it's like looking at poetry and saying, why did he use this word instead of that word?
Right. So it's
Why did
almost
he?
like the language of music, like
Yeah,
written, like
right,
or
exactly.
you know, in practice. But yeah.
Exactly. I mean,
Okay.
that's why people like certain bloggers or writers instead of others because their word choices are different and the way they say things
Hmm.
may be more applicable. And so that's what music theory does is it helps you to see and understand.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And then ear
Okay.
training is I kind of equate it to vocabulary learning because we know as musicians, and I'm starting to learn this more myself. It was a truth that's very difficult to swallow is that you can only hear what you already know.
Mm.
So, as great as it is to sit for hours and hours in front of a television screen without subtitles, which I did, to learn my languages, it's good to have subtitles because then you actually have it in your head. You
Yeah.
write the words down, and that's where study comes in. So all these fill into one another, kind of.
Hmm.
They're all very intertwined. And
Yeah.
so ear training, what ear training is for musicians is when we hear like a certain sound
Hmm.
or group of sounds, intervals we call them, between two notes.
Yeah.
So sorry, if I play a C, for instance, or a Do in Europe, and then I play a D, so C D, that interval, as it's called, is called the major second. And
Hmm.
so what ear training does is it allows you to just listen and then go, oh, I know what that is,
Hmm.
or why is this chord different instead of that chord different,
Hmm.
instead of that chord. And so that's what vocabulary does. Is it also allows you to hear what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, so like when for example you're making a sentence and you're like, "Okay, can I say this?" and a native speaker is like, "No, you don't put those words together." Just like,
Right.
you know, "Can I play
Right. All
this?"
the
It's like those
cases.
notes don't sound good together or like
Exactly. Actually, that's very good. Yeah.
yeah.
Uh, Another example, like I used at the gathering, was when you have one sentence, which I think was pretty great, actually. So if we have, this is why grammar and ear training are both important, is
Mhm.
if you say, I Sunday want to eat bananas,
Mhm.
people will understand you. It's grammatically incorrect. You sound like Tarzan, but people will understand.
Mhm.
What you really want to say is, I want to eat bananas on Sunday,
Right.
right? Good.
Right.
But if we want to take it a step further, and this is where we get into all the complications, and this is where they all come in together, is if
Mhm.
you want to say, I want to eat bananas on my Sunday instead.
Mm.
And so that completely, you're using the same words kind of, but it has a whole different new meaning.
Yeah, exactly. And just being aware, like, if you don't know that Sunday, like, you're probably going to learn the day of the week before you learn that a Sunday is like ice cream.
Right,
So
right,
then you would just hear like, yeah, Sunday, you wouldn't know about the homonym. Um,
right.
or is it homonym? Yes. When two words sound the same, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, language nerds.
Yeah.
So when you hear when you know a word and you hear it, you start like finding it everywhere. So like I noticed this after like 6 years or of learning Finnish. You know, someone will like teach me a word. I'm like, how have I gone so long without ever hearing that word? Like I've
Mm,
never heard that word before, and then
yeah.
suddenly it starts popping up everywhere, and you're
Right.
just like, okay, so I was just like blind to it.
Yes. Yes.
And then you realize that it's like widespread usage and it's everywhere and it's just not been part of your knowledge base.
Hmm. Hmm. That's totally true. Like, for example, when I speak Indonesian with friends, we always have English words thrown in. And if there's people that don't speak Indonesian around us, they're always laughing because they don't understand anything. All they hear is what some of my friends say. It sounds like minions talking from Despicable Me. And then all of a
Yeah.
sudden you hear the word. uh,
Wi-Fi.
I don't know, iPhone or internet, and everyone's like, oh wait, what? You know, you're just
Yeah.
talking gibberish, and then these words come up, and so it's the same thing. Is the reason these people are able to hear it is because they know the word already,
Exactly.
and
And
so you'll
everything
notice
else
this with
is
other
like,
languages. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. Okay. So at the end of your talk about music, you imparted with us your like musician tools.
Hmm.
And some of like I thought these were just really wise words to live by and kind of something that we have to practice every day. And some of my favorites were break it down and make it yours,
Hmm.
imitate, and jam. That was like my absolutely favorite. So can you tell us a bit about what these mean and how to use them in in music and language learning and whichever.
Sure. So breaking it down, it's really important to remember that whatever it is that whatever anything that exists can be broken down. And so if we take a look at, for instance, an object, the object can be broken down into parts, and the parts can be broken down into, like if we look at the body, parts that can be broken down into cells, which can be broken down into atoms, and then it just keeps going. You know, even atoms aren't even at the bottom of the chain.
And
You
like a
know,
sentence can be broken down into like clauses and clauses into words,
right?
words into sounds,
Right,
and
right,
yeah,
exactly. So that's what I said. Was sometimes people go, I have to learn X language, let's say German, and you know
yeah,
it has a reputation of being difficult. So they go, oh, I have to learn German. But the
yeah.
truth is, no, no, no. You're not going to learn the whole language at once. What you can do is even like eating a meal. You eat it one bite at a time. So you can break the language down into topics. Break the topics down into sentences, sentences to phrases, phrases to words, words into letters, syllables. You know,
Yeah.
and
And like,
yeah.
what does learning a language really mean when it comes down to it? Because you're not going to learn absolutely everything in that language. Like, there's
Hmm.
that example going around online with that guy who talks about fluency, who speaks like
Hmm.
10 languages, and it's
Hmm.
like in all the like footers of things
Hmm.
like advertised, and he says how like, you know, if you can read magical text in Arabic as opposed to if you've been traveling around countries where Arabic is spoken, and you can like hold your own in like a market, like who is more
Hmm.
fluent, the academic or like the
Right.
user, but they don't know each other's Arabic. It's just
Hmm.
like these separate things. So like I'm probably never gonna do like physics in Finnish or like
Right.
stuff like that. So like
Right.
this whole concept of like it's like what is it that I really need from this language, and then
Right.
breaking that down into parts, I think.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never really thought much about that because yeah, it is true though. It is really true. I mean, heck, us if a physicist came to us and started speaking, like I mean, we have that phrase in English, like, could you speak English? You know, it's all Greek to me. You know, these two
Yeah.
phrases they exist simply because we can't speak their English.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, true. Okay, so breaking things down and making it yours.
mhm.
How do we
So
make something
making it
ours?
So making it yours. So for instance, if we want to, well, let's keep on the breaking it down for a bit. So
Mm-hmm.
so for instance, I was talking about how we can chunk words down, and
Mm-hmm.
so there's actually a name for this. Opera singers call it back chaining. I didn't know this when I did the talk.
Back
They
chaining.
call it back chaining. Yeah.
Okay.
So this is when they take a word and they start from the end
Mm-hmm.
and then add the syllables on. So, for instance, if you have a difficult time saying the word particularly, for instance, I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
that's actually difficult. It sounded like it would be.
Mm-hmm.
So you just start with lee, uh, sorry, what are the syllables? Oh, lurly, cularly, ticularly, particularly, or something my teacher always said with music is you can also pick and choose. So you can go particularly, you know, and
Yeah.
just pick out syllables, repeat them twice, do them
Mm-hmm.
3 times. Lee, 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 and then just make it your own.
Okay.
That's one way.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Interesting.
yeah. But going into making it yours, other than with just words, is something is very that's very interesting. Is composers are always writing notes everywhere, and you
Mm-hmm.
know every composer's style of writing is completely different. Same with us. My handwriting is different from yours, but we
Mm-hmm.
can still read and understand it. And the other thing is conductors, for instance. You know, we think that they just have a huge musical score in front of them when they conduct, but the truth is they have tons of scribbles all over it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and they use color pencils actually to remind themselves. Here it has to be extra loud, or here's when the bassoons come in, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something I think we need to do with language learning is to stop trying to make our books as nice and neat as possible, but to write
Mm-hmm.
in all the words and make it look dirty and used, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
using colored pencils, I thought was an absolutely genius idea, which I'm trying to
Mm-hmm.
implement a bit more.
Yeah. Actually, that reminds me, when I was studying German, one of the girls who sat in the same like row as me for a couple of years, I don't know, we always had the same seats for some reason. She was using highlighters to remember the different genders. So she had like Der was always blue,
Mm,
D was, I don't know, pink, and I think Das was probably yellow. And then
yeah.
so we had these Vokabelblatt, and
Mhm.
she would just highlight all the words, and like I was not doing that well with the genders. I never learned them in German. I just like throw
Yeah.
them out there, and
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
know what I'm
Yeah.
saying. It's fine.
Right. Right.
So, and I just thought that was like a really genius idea, but I think I clued into it like at the end of our German class time. I was like, damn it, that was smart.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, I think like colors can really be used in different ways. Like
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, for the article thing, Gabriel Weiner has this thing, and where he says, for the three articles in German can be really confusing. So for der, when he learns a word, um, for instance, I don't know, der Spiegel.
Hmm.
So there he would say,
So the
think of an
mirror.
explosion. Yeah, the
Yeah.
mirror. Yeah, so think of the mirror exploding. And so you'll
Hmm.
never forget that it's masculine if you put an explosion with masculine. And then for feminine,
Hmm.
I think he said, think of something melting.
Hmm.
And so you just take one thing and make it melt in your head. Or
Hmm.
for neuter, he said, think of something just suddenly shattering into pieces. So you just make an image of each one of
Is
these
the
things.
shattering like neutral somehow?
No, no, no. He just made
Oh,
just
like you
random
have one for each.
for each. Yeah.
Yeah, for each
So for
gender.
each masculine object, think of something crazy. So for him, it was exploding.
Yeah.
For the feminine object, he said either think of it as melting, or I think another example on another article he wrote was like think of it as on fire. And then
Hmm.
the last one for neutral, think of it as just shattering into pieces.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so if you see a mirror in your head just exploding suddenly, you'll remember always
Hmm.
it's masculine.
Yeah. Okay. So that would be one way of making it yours, that
Mhm.
basically like you know
Yeah.
what it is and then you have your own associations to kind of like add on top of it.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Right.
So
Right.
tell us about imitation.
Imitation. Okay,
Hmm.
so imitating is really important. Musicians do it all the time.
Hmm.
We're always listening to different people. Now, of course, I think before imitate, sorry, not before imitation. Imitation is good because what you're doing is you're building a basic foundation for yourself based on someone else. Now, in this culture, we kind of believe in being individual and blah 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 blah, but it's not bad to learn from other people and have a foundation first because from there you have something and then you can go off.
Hmm.
If you just go off and do your own thing, but you're not really in the field yet, you're just kind of going vigilante, like,
Yeah.
okay,
Like know the
uh,
rules before you can break them.
right, yeah. So rules, some people like them, some people don't, and I think it's both. You gotta like them and dislike them at the same time. Figure out which ones are
Hmm.
good.
Yeah. Like
So,
imitate them, but question them,
right,
sort of, to
exactly.
find your own.
Exactly. And so when we're learning a new accent, that's exactly what we're doing is we have to imitate people.
Hmm.
And it's okay as long as you don't do it in front of them. But
Or
yeah,
to
so
what extent?
yeah,
Like,
to what extent?
yeah,
Yes. So if
yeah.
you're learning, I don't know, French, for instance, you need to be able to imitate the in a sentence because French people do all the time when they pause in a sentence or
Yeah.
yeah, or when Germans say "ach so," that's also really
Hmm.
important. That's what makes the sentence really German.
Hmm.
And so doing those things is not offensive. Rather, it's making you more like them.
Hmm.
And so, and then from there, after you get all the basics, then you can start going off into doing all your own things. But imitating
Yeah.
always helps you learn.
Yeah. And I think it's easiest to start with stuff like ach so, and like in Finnish you have this like yo means yes, and when people are kind of actively listening they tend to inhale and speak at the same time. They apparently do this in northern
Uh-huh.
Sweden as well, so it's like it's something like yo yo yo.
Yeah.
and then
Okay.
and then we once heard on the like, those things are so much, in my opinion, easier to remember. And like
Mhm.
learning sound effects, like ouch is like I in Finnish. But like those things you can just like adopt, and those suddenly make you like so much more Finnish. You don't actually
Right.
even need the actual words in between, but just those sound effects. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so imitation. What about jamming? So my favorite one. And I remember the musical one, but I don't actually remember how you liken this to language learning. So
Mhm.
please.
So jamming for those that are not musicians, what musicians do. They just get together and they just hang out and play some tunes. Now,
Hmm.
classical musicians don't tend to do this. What they do instead is they have like music and they what they call reading parties. So they just read music that's already been written.
Reading
But what,
parties?
yeah, it's a bit cheesy in my opinion, but that's probably because I can't do it as well. But so for jazz musicians, rock musicians, what they do is they just go around. They have what's called a chord progression, and they just play over these chords, or they have a song. So let's say somebody says, "Hey, why don't we play Fly Me to the Moon?" And then they
Hmm.
just go over that hours and hours, not really, but and they'll switch songs in between,
Hmm.
and and the thing is, not everyone is playing at the same time.
Hmm.
Everyone has a moment to shine. There's a group moments as well when they all come in.
Hmm.
So basically, they're still part of the jam. They're still part of the moment. And so, how does
Hmm.
that relate to language learning? It's when you go and hang out with, let's say, you're learning Spanish, a bunch of Spaniards from town,
Hmm.
right? And they're talking about football and all these other things that they do in Spain, and they really enjoy. And so, even though if you're an American and you don't watch soccer, which they call football, the point is to just be there and
Yeah.
enjoy it. If you're learning
Yeah.
Spanish, just be like this little Asian guy that's just sitting there. He's not doing anything. He's a part of the conversation and can't understand. Uh, you're taking mental notes, and this
Hmm.
is something I just thought of before. I remember when I was in Barcelona and, okay, I spoke Spanish at that point, but I didn't understand everything the taxi driver had to say, but I asked him a question anyways. But the point
Hmm.
was I let him ramble.
Yeah.
And so when you do that, you're training your ears as
Right.
well. And so jamming, but more importantly than just jamming, is also sharing.
Yeah.
And so what musicians do is we go out and we play at nursery homes, we play at libraries, we do shows for kids or whatever the case may be.
Hmm.
And how does that relate to language learning? Sharing your love of languages with other people, sharing
Hmm.
why you learned this language, or if you're in a big city and you see a lost French tourist, you go up to them and help them in French,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
tell them your story. That's what I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like that idea. And to me it's like sharing this kind of connection between people. Like even if your language skills are super minimal, the fact is like I'm human, you're human, and even if we can't communicate with the same language, like I can still show you kindness and I can
Mhm,
still I just wrote a blog post about this last week where I said like you don't need to know 1,000 words before stringing like five of them together and smiling at someone.
mhm.
So
Yeah.
so like I think sharing your like energy, yourself, and giving like a part of yourself in that way instead of when we get overwhelmed and we get like really scared and we don't want to talk, then we're actually like cutting ourselves off from the person. Oh my
Right.
God, what is going on? To stop sharing. Those are wise words to live by. So we had, what do we have? You don't change music, it changes you. We've talked about the music training being similar to language training, and then we've also talked about the musician's tools. So break it down and make it yours, imitate, and jam. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us, Fiel?
As far as I know, I think that's a good basic beginning for a lot of people. If
Mm-hmm.
this concept is probably new to most people, and I'm still developing it.
Mm-hmm.
And you can kind of follow how that progression goes on my blog at between3worlds.com.
Okay, so we'll
And
put the link between below
yeah,
this
that's
video.
below the. I'm still exploring this because
Mm-hmm.
I did actually just discover it just before the gathering, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a huge topic. It's really big, but we can discover it together. And
Yeah.
so that's my invitation to everyone else out there.
Awesome. Yeah, so be sure to check out Fiel Sahir's blog. Hey, thank you so much. This has been so fun.
Of course, this was fun.